Welcome, everybody, to another episode of PhinManiacs.com podcast. I am your host, Louis Sung, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Chad Ronenbaum, and Ian Berger, who has quickly become the second-in-command of the website. Gentlemen, it's good to have you back, and it's good to be back.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
It is great to be back. Around this time of the year, it's the best time to be talking on a podcast.
Yeah, there's plenty to talk about. We haven't done a show in a while because scheduling conflicts and a lot of other stuff happening in our real-world lives. You all know how it is. We're just trying to survive day in and day out. But anyway, so we're here now at the request of several who have been wanting this show to come back. So here we are, making time for chatting all about what's been going on this offseason, and I'm sure that the subject of to tank or not to tank will come up at some point. The Dolphins offseason moves and what should they do in the draft, or what will they do in the draft. We'll probably make a prediction at some point. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it. First and foremost, I don't think we mentioned this in the last show, but we finally figured out who was the Dolphins' head coach. It's now Brian Flores, first-time head coach, a New England Patriot, Bill Belichick protege, who we all thought was the absolute last candidate it was going to be. We have to give props to Adam Beasley for pinning that out of the crowd. He was like the only one who'd been saying that it was going to be Flores, and we were like, nah, it's not going to be Flores. So, no, it was Flores. So, props to him for that. He's already started to make some moves. There have been a lot of releases. We've lost Cameron Wake. We've lost Ryan Tannehill. We have lost Robert Quinn. We've lost a lot of players that we knew were going to go. Josh Sitton ended up retiring, and we've got just a whole bunch of players that have dropped off the map for the Dolphins and have now moved on to other teams or have just decided that they don't want to play anymore. We've picked up a lot of AAF players. American Alliance of Football, I believe that's the now defunct league that all these players have been coming from. Picked up the top pass rusher there, Jaron Elliott, who, by the way, was with the Saints for a while before he wound up going to that league and then here to Miami. Just it's going to be a lot to recap. We'll just kind of let the conversation flow as it goes. So we're going to discuss, in general, the Dolphins offseason. So, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you, what has been the one thing that has stood out to you the most so far for this offseason, and are you in favor of it, or are you looking at it like, shouldn't be doing this? All right, I'm going to start with you, Chad.
I think the biggest thing on this offseason that we've never seen before is the Dolphins don't have an emphasis on winning in 2019. And I think to clarify that, because of all the talk about tanking, I'm not suggesting the team is tanking by any means. I don't think they're going to intentionally lose ball games. But in terms of their personnel moves right now, because that's all we've been able to see. We haven't seen Flores coach a practice even yet. But all we're seeing is the early free agency moves that the Dolphins are making, and all those moves that you're seeing, the players that are going and the players that are coming, are simply designed that their focus on 2019 is to develop a team that's capable of winning the playoffs in the future. This team, I don't believe, are making any personnel moves designed to try to chase the playoffs or Super Bowl in 2019. And I have to say, I can't, at this point, it's inconclusive because we haven't seen who they are going to bring in. I mean, they really haven't been doing anything mainly but getting rid of people, and the people they are signing are likely not going to be impact or starting players. Maybe there'll be one or two miracle Cam Wake type stories that come from the AFF or from somewhere else, but they really haven't made their moves yet. And so really what they've been doing is getting rid of a bunch of players that aren't going to be impactful in 2020 or 2021. And, as a Dolphins fan for a long time, I've tweeted this before, we've seen the Dolphins be an 8-8, 7-9 sort of team for a couple decades now. They've been mediocre. We've been through a few bad seasons. We haven't been through too many really bad seasons. We also haven't been through very many playoff seasons. It's just been a lot of this picking in the teens and just missing the playoff type of teams. And I think what Stephen Ross was pushing behind this and what Chris Beer and Flores are on board with is we're going to try to build a playoff team. We're not going to try to build a competitive team. We want a really good team, not a decent team.
And Ian?
So a little similar to what Chad was saying, but the one thing that I noticed in the offseason is that the Dolphins are sticking to their plan. When Stephen Ross announced that Adam Gase was no longer with the team, he talked about really a rebuild without using those exact words or without using that exact word. He was talking about a rebuild, about how the Dolphins, again, had been spending significant amounts of money on free agents. And even though they spent all that money, it didn't result in anything onto the field. Part of that is bad selection from the coaches of the players that they were selecting. And the other part to that is not being able to develop the players that you have on the field. And I'll tell you, I will jump up and down and scream how many times we keep saying that exact same thing, that we need to find a coaching staff, that can develop their players so that you get 7, 8, 10 draft picks, and you could develop most of those guys to be contributors on the field. We see it here and again, or every once in a while, but we don't see it consistent enough. So for me, I'm excited because, we haven't been active in free agency. I know that there's an article out there I just put out that said I gave the Dolphins an A for free agency so far. It's because we're doing something different. We're not sticking to the same old stuff that has gotten us, as Chad mentioned, mediocre records over the last 10, 15, 20 years. We are actually pressing the reset button, and we're starting from scratch. And I'm a little excited to see what it's going to look like. Are these coaches the right ones to do it? I don't know. We won't know until it actually starts happening, but I'm just excited because there's some differences on the field. There's some differences going on off of the field, and it just feels different for me because we're not doing the same thing.
Nope, we're definitely not doing the same thing. But now here's the question: you Chad said that you don't think they're actually tanking. Now the question is, did you want them to tank? Did you want them? Do you like the idea of tanking? Because there are a lot of people still who are desperately hoping that Ryan Fitzpatrick, who by the way the Dolphins signed to be their bridge quarterback, they are desperately hoping that he does not flip back into being Fitzmagic at any point this season, and that he is just god awful all year long, so that they can get the 1-15 record that will instantly win them the number 1 overall pick in 2020 and get the cult of Tua their pride and joy and bring the Alabama quarterback to Miami. So do you like the idea of tanking, if only because of what it would mean for the future, or does that kind of notion just make you sick to your stomach?
No, I don't think there's any way that's the plan, Lewis. And I know people are saying that, but there's just so many problems. And problem number 1 is it does require you to intentionally lose. And I think the team would even get in trouble with the NFL if it came out they were being told to intentionally lose. I just don't think that's the case. And I don't think Flores, hearing everything I've heard Flores say, I don't think he would take the job if he was being told that he's supposed to lose football games.
Well, yeah, I know that's the case. I'm asking, what would if there were no rules and you could do whatever you want with no repercussions, would you do it?
No, I wouldn't, Lewis, because this isn't about a player, and that's been the mistake that the team's made for 2 decades, and it's a mistake teams are still making all around the league right now. It's about like players, and you need talent, and Ian touched on this exactly. You need to develop players, and what this team needs to start doing is bringing in young players that these coaches can develop to be good football players. And what historically people think a lot of times when they talk about the draft is this team had a really good draft. And people, I think a lot of times attribute that to, well, the personnel guy picked really good out of the hat and picked the right players. It's only half of the equation, picking good players. The other half of the equation is having a staff that actually develops them into good players. There's a reason the New England Patriots have dominated NFL for the last 2 decades. It's not even close to, and there is no team even close to the Patriots and how successful they've been. And the reason is they develop players. How often in the preseasons and off seasons have people said, wow, did the Patriots really stock up on some stud players? You don't see them getting the Antonio Browns and Le'Veon Bells. They just get their guys in and they coach them up and they figure out how to utilize them to the best of their talents. And that's what this team desperately needs. And so there's only been 2 cases, listen, in my opinion, that I can in modern NFL with the draft and everything. There's only two players I could even think of that would be worthwhile that you desperately want to get your hands on in the draft. And that was Peyton Manning years back in their late 90s and Andrew Luck. And it's because those guys were seniors. They'd probably, I don't know if they played 4 years, but I think they both at least played 3 years of college football and were very, very good and were clearly ready to be starting NFL quarterbacks. I can't think of another player that's been that obvious to be very good. And I definitely don't think Tua is that right now. And even as good as Tua might look on how he throws the football, we're talking about a guy that's a junior in college this year. And that means Tua could have a bad year. He might throw, way more interceptions this year. He might have another knee surgery. I think he's already had 2 knee surgeries. He might hurt his arm, whatever. And that might hurt his draft status. And it might be in the best interest for him to just return to Alabama. There's no guarantee that Tua has to declare for the 2020 draft. He could easily declare for the 2021 draft. And so how foolish does it start to become to say we're going to tank for this player when you have no guarantee whatsoever that he's even going to be available in that upcoming draft? So that, to me, it just doesn't make any sense to attempt to tank for him. But I think what a lot of people are struggling with is what I'm trying to differentiate is what the team is doing is they're not putting an emphasis on trying to win games in 2019 because they're doing for the first time what they've never done and what a lot of teams never even are able to do is say we understand we are not going to be a Super Bowl contender in 2019. We don't have the team right now to do that. So we want to be a playoff contender and a Super Bowl contender as soon as we possibly can, but we can't do it in a year. So we're going to make choices that might mean we may only win 4 games. We might only win 6 games. We might only win 2. We're not going to bring in players that are not going to be very good players in 2020 or 2021, which means you get rid of players that are probably into their mid-30s or early 30s because chances are by the time they're 32, 33, 34, they're probably not going to be the player you want to be starting for you. And so that's why you're seeing this max exodus. It doesn't make any sense to pay Cameron Wake to play for this team this year if you don't really intend to compete for the playoffs because he's 37 years old and you're way further ahead to play a 3rd-round draft pick at defensive end that might get a lot better over the course of the year as you play him. I think that Ryan Fitzpatrick move speaks to exactly what I'm saying. If this team wanted to lose, you don't go sign Ryan Fitzpatrick because he's been in the league for like 15, 16 years. And Ryan Fitzpatrick absolutely is good enough to get you 5 or 6 wins. And if Tua is going to be the number 1 overall pick, 5 or 6 wins is not going to give you in a position to get Tua anyway. You might as well start like Falk or Rudolph or somebody like that if you want a better chance of losing because Fitzpatrick's not that bad. He's absolutely not a playoff caliber quarterback, but it doesn't make sense to bring in a quarterback that's decent in terms of trying to lose all your games. So what I think Ryan Fitzpatrick brings to the table and why they brought him in is one is they needed a quarterback that would accept a per year salary that wouldn't cause them to lose comp picks. Because again, their goal is to have a good team by the 2020 and 2021. And to do that, they need as many draft picks as they can get. And so I think, if Ryan Fitzpatrick wasn't their number 1 target to be a bridge quarterback, if you will. I mean, they brought in Bridgewater, and I heard that they had some discussions with RG3, which is true and which isn't, I don't know. But neither one of those quarterbacks were willing to sign for what Fitzpatrick signed for. And that's why Fitzpatrick got the job. And I think that indicates that they're planning on drafting a young quarterback to put with him. And I think what Ryan Fitzpatrick offers is he's not going to create waves. I think that was an issue. Like with Teddy Bridgewater and RG3 is they wanted to be told, you're going to be the starting quarterback. You're our guy. And the Dolphins, I think, are just being straight up. No, we're going to draft a rookie, and we're looking for a guy to help mentor that rookie and get him ready to play. And so that how many times has Ryan Fitzpatrick done that in his career? You almost couldn't sign a better quarterback to help you get a rookie ready to play than Ryan Fitzpatrick. So anyway, in a long story short, I don't think this team at all is tanking. They're not making moves that would suggest to me that their intent is to tank, and I wouldn't be supportive because I really don't think one player is going to affect you that much anyway. And it's different if you're talking about trading for Patrick Mahomes or proven
Russell Wilson.
Or Russell Wilson. Yeah, I'd consider having a horrible year to get my hands on those guys, but that's not something that's realistic. You don't get those guys, and the only way you get a Russell Wilson or a Patrick Mahomes is you have to draft them and develop them. And that's, I think, Miami's clear plan is to get a quarterback. I think they're going to get one this year. I don't know if he'll be the guy, but I'll be really surprised if Miami doesn't have a rookie quarterback from this draft. I'm not saying it's going to be a first-round pick, but I think they'll get a rookie in this draft, and that isn't going to preclude them from taking one in 2020 either.
And Ian, you're like an annual season ticket holder. If they had decided to tank, your reaction would have been?
If they decided to tank, I'd have to. I don't know. It depends on how it was communicated, I guess, or how you found out, right? And, I would have probably have been angry about it, but you're not gonna sell any tickets if the goal is to go in and lose, right? If that's the expectation for you to go 0-16 in the season, you're not going to get anybody that renews, right? So I'll be honest with you. I get angry when I read stories from very prominent media guys that are specifically talking about the Dolphins' plans to lose. And they don't articulate themselves well enough, to the point where Chad was just mentioning that the goal is not, when these coaches got hired, they weren't hired with the expectation they were going to lose, right? When these players are coming in or players are resigning or whatever the case is, they're not coming in with a plan to lose. It just so happens that, maybe you don't have as much talent or what appears to be as much talent as the team has had over the last year, 2 years, 3 years. But even with that talent, you weren't getting anywhere with the team. So it bothers me because the Dolphins are not tanking. They're reorganizing. They're pressing the reset button. They're going to work their butts off to try and get as many wins as they possibly can. And let's be honest, say some way somehow they get to 8 wins this season. You know what? They're going to have plenty of draft picks next year. If they want to move around in that draft, if they want to move up a little bit, they'll have the ability to do that because they will have some draft picks in their pocket. Because, again, too, they're going to be picking up some compensatory picks. I don't even know how to say that word right, but compensatory picks, excuse me, and which will also add to their number of potential draft picks for next season. But here's the other thing, and Chad touched on it a little bit, but I want to focus real quick on it. Teams that do, or fans that say they want to lose this season to get the top pick for the next season, there is zero guarantee that player that you're going to get is going to do anything. And for our case specifically, for the Miami Dolphins, if you don't address that offensive line, you could put the absolute best quarterback behind that line, behind that offensive line, and they are going to have a horrible season, and they're going to have a horrible career. Bottom line, unless you got a quarterback who's also running back and is just running for their lives, during that entire season, during the entire games, they are not going to be successful. So I know we'll talk a little bit about what I'm thinking about for the upcoming draft, but Dolphins are not tanking this season, and they're gonna try their best to win as many games as they possibly can.
And that's been my mentality this whole time. It's amazing how many people have come to me and said that their actions dictate what they're doing and not their words. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, their actions dictate that what they're doing is that they are trying to they're not going for a Super Bowl run, but they're not trying to lose everything. That's why, again, you brought up Ryan Fitzpatrick, and like the first free agent signing they had was Dwayne Allen, who is a veteran tight end. I mean, if you're trying to lose, then why do you bring him in? And by the way, Ryan Fitzpatrick, if he does well somehow, then there's a very real possibility that 5th round comp pick that the Dolphins got for Cameron Wake, that could very well go away. That could very easily be taken away if he does well enough, because Fitzpatrick was not a cut quarterback. This is the way that the compensation formula works. If a player is released from his team before his contract is up, then you can sign him to a new deal and you won't be in danger of losing any of your comp picks. However, if their contract runs out and they decide that they're not going to come back to their old team, then this is how the Jawan James thing kicks in. Jawan James left Miami, his contract ran out, and the Denver Broncos signed him to a big money deal. That is what gave the Dolphins what we assume, and at least we know for sure right now, is going to be a 3rd round compensatory pick. The Cameron Wake one, his contract ran out, he went to the Titans, we're in line to get a 5th round pick. If Fitzpatrick does well, which we don't know if he will or not, but he might, if he does well, there's a very real danger that 5th round comp pick will be gone. If you want to win, or rather if you want to lose, and you want to get as many draft picks as you possibly can, which, by the way, the Dolphins did a phenomenal job and very sneaky and innovative way of doing it this year. Just to go off on a little bit of a tangent, the Ryan Tannehill trade to the Titans and the Robert Quinn trade to the Cowboys, where basically they traded some of their salary cap space for an extra pick. That was genius by Chris Grier. I want to just say that right now. Absolute brilliance on the part of Chris Grier. We normally would not have gotten anything for Robert Quinn. And despite the fact that we still think Tannehill is a good quarterback, there was no team willing to take on his contract, and there was no team willing to do any of that stuff. But nevertheless, we managed to get something for him because Chris Grier said, tell you what, you give us a draft pick, and we will take off some of his salary cap just for you guys. And the Titans were all for it. It was a brilliant strategy, and I'm so happy they did that. I wish that we could have gotten more for Tannehill himself, because again, the idea is that he's nothing more than a backup. He's no good, blah, 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 blah. Personally, I think he's better than Mariota at this point, and since Tennessee actually has a decent offensive line, they're probably going to do pretty well. But that's just me. He's not there to compete. He's there to be the backup, regardless of what we think about him. But anyway, if you are trying to lose, you do not go and get a Ryan Fitzpatrick, like Chad said. This is what the Indianapolis Colts did. Back in 2011, when they did an absolutely rotten job. They went 2-14. The hashtag all that year was suck for luck. Suck for luck. Hashtag suck for luck. You want so badly to get your hands on Andrew Luck that these were the quarterbacks that they put on the field for that whole year. They had, let's see, it said here's 3 games started for an ancient Kerry Collins, okay? Like when was the last time you even heard that name? He was ancient back then. He started 3 games. Dan Orlovsky, he started 5 games. He played in 8. And then you finally have Curtis Painter. Is he even still in the league? Curtis Painter. He started 8 games. He played in 9. The Colts, that team, like everybody seemed to agree, no, they were tanking. Because who was the best quarterback out of that bunch? Painter? I don't even know who Painter is. Orlovsky. Like, the only name I recognize is Kerry Collins, and the only reason I recognize Kerry Collins is because he used to be in my NFL 2K game when I was a kid. So, that was a team that was tanking. And guess what? They did it without shame. And they got their Andrew Luck. But is there any quarterback in this upcoming draft that you feel comfortable enough saying that they are the best guy coming out of this draft, that you can safely say, you know what, we can tank for this guy? You brought up, you talked about Tua for a little bit, Chad. That's no good. He's not somebody you have so much confidence in that you're willing to give up the whole season for him. I'm sure he's going to be good. I don't know if he's going to be the elite quarterback everybody thinks he is. Seriously, I used the word cult before, but I'm not going to back off of it. It is like a cult for Tua. Like the tank for Tua stuff. Oh my goodness, you would think he was the second coming of Dan Marino and Steve Young all rolled into one. He can throw like Marino and he can run like Steve Young. Like, He's not that special, boys and girls.
Hey, Lewis, even if he was, he's got a whole season to play before he's even eligible for the draft. He could have a Teddy Bridgewater injury the first game of the season for Alabama, and then he's done. He's gone. And so it doesn't, even if he were on the same level of a Andrew Luck or Peyton Manning, it's not the same situation because he's not available for another season. And then he's a junior. When Peyton Manning and Luck were in the draft, they were seniors. You knew they were going to be in the draft. So I've just been making that point, unless it's like Herbert or somebody like that you are set on, there is no guarantee whatsoever that Tua is going to be available in the 2020 draft.
Right, you're rolling the dice on that. It's like he may or he may not actually come out. Then if he doesn't come out, then you're left with Justin Herbert and Jake Fromm, which some people think that Fromm is the best guy coming out of Georgia. Then there's Justin Herbert, who they think he was the best guy coming out of Oregon. And if he had decided to come out this year, there were a lot of people speculating that Herbert would have been the best quarterback available. And now what we're left with is we're trying to figure out who is the consensus best quarterback to come out of this draft. Is it Drew Lock? Personally, I don't think so. I see a lot of what was it? I think he's got the big arm, but he makes a lot of wow plays, and he also makes a lot of wow kind of plays. Like the wow that says, like the wow that makes you want to smack your head against the wall because you can't believe he just did that. Then you have Daniel Jones, who I don't know anything about really. He's just another guy. And then you have, of course, Dwayne Haskins, who I personally think is the best quarterback in this draft. I've seen a lot of people tell me that I'm wrong because, like, who are the people that I'm listening to? Because I personally am not a film guru. I don't know everything there is to know about draft prospects, but I have a lot of people who I respect and I listen to, and there are a lot of people who say Haskins is something special. So now, they're citing to me the idea that he's an Ohio State quarterback. There's no such thing as a good Ohio State quarterback. That's a system thing. Well, okay, but you know what? There's a lot of people. Not a lot. I shouldn't say a lot because I've only seen like one guy really make this comparison, but it was one that got my eyebrows raised. They're saying that Dwayne Haskins, the system quarterback that everybody thinks he's no good because he comes from Ohio State because it's a system, the comparison that Haskins drew was of Tom Brady, who I don't think anybody would really argue is also a system quarterback. That system in New England has helped make Tom Brady's career, and I don't think anybody is going to argue against that. If Haskins came in to a system that is fitting to what it is he does best, he's not a runner. He is a pocket quarterback who will pick you apart with his brain and not with his legs, which means that, again, he's very Tom Brady-like. So if Haskins got to sit for a year with Ryan Fitzpatrick taking the necessary lumps, because we all know that it's going to be a pretty bad offensive line this upcoming season. I don't think anybody's expecting it to be rock solid like it would be in Foxborough, where if Tom Brady so much as gets sneezed on, somebody gets fired. But that's why Fitzpatrick is here. If the Dolphins were to draft Haskins in this upcoming draft, let him sit for a while, let him get acclimated to what the NFL is all about, I think the Dolphins could have something very special. And then we wouldn't really have to worry about 2020, and we can pick whoever we really want. Because with all the quarterbacks that are going to be picked in 2020, think of the other elite talent that could be sitting there when it's the Dolphins' turn to pick. And it's going to be an awesome position player that we could use to fill in those ranks because we already have Haskins. That's just the way I'm looking at it. I can't say if that's the best plan or not because, again, I am not sure what Haskins will do once he gets there. I personally think he will be special. And quite frankly, I really am tired of the tanking talk and the whole Tua Tagovailoa. That's how you say it, I think. Tua Tagovailoa. But either way, I'm not part of that cult. I never will be. And it's that kind of tunnel vision that makes me feel like this team needs to know better, and it's what makes me just say have trust in Chris Greer and Brian Flores, because I'm hoping that they know better than the ones who say that we need to do this or all is lost. It is never all is lost if this does not happen. Tunnel vision is never a good thing, and I think this front office is smart enough to not get in that trap. So I think I have accidentally transitioned us to the draft, so let's go ahead and talk about it. Ian, I'm going to let you go first. Obviously, the 2019 draft is coming up real soon. We have a lot of options with the 13th pick. We could stand pat. We could hopefully find a partner. I don't think anybody would argue if you could trade down, you would, but maybe you would. I don't know. If you are Chris Greer and Brian Flores and you are on the clock with the 13th pick, what is your plan? What are you going to do?
So, it's so funny because I was talking to Chad before the show started about how, we had a podcast about a year ago now, right before the 2018 draft, and and Chad was talking about how, it's just so unknown that it's probably the craziest year, for football because there's no apparent way that it's going to go. And then we talked about how this season it seems even crazier, because you've got your Kyler Murrays of the world where, 4 or 5 months ago he was a second-round pick, and then after the combine, comes and goes, Kyler Murray's now the first overall pick, but you really don't know if he's going to be the first overall pick, and there's so many other things can happen, if he does get selected or if he doesn't get selected. But to answer your question, Lewis, I'll be honest with you, I think the best move and what I'm hoping for the Dolphins is that they trade down, because a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think they're going to be picking a quarterback in the first round. I don't think that is the plan for this team. I do see, as you mentioned, they will probably get a quarterback at some point this season, because I think, if you think about the quarterbacks that the Dolphins have taken, since Tannehill, there really hasn't been that many, and they've all been 6th-round picks or 7th-round picks, and they aren't really anyone to write home about. And I think, we all know that the quarterback position is one of, if not the most important positions on a football field, and sometimes you got to just keep searching for one until you actually find one. So I'm hoping that the Dolphins can collect some picks, and focus on their offensive line and their defensive line, because that's where we need the help, and that's where we are going to need the help for the next 3, 5, 7 years. And if you stock up and you get your team ready for that 2020 draft, guess what? You're going to have a quarterback that's not going to get his butt killed every single time he comes onto the field, because you've already addressed some of those needs with some younger guys. What's funny is everybody talks about Kyler Murray, and
I forgot about Kyler Murray. Oh my God, my mind blanked on him. I was thinking I'm forgetting somebody in my list of quarterbacks, and then you remember it's like Kyler Murray, duh.
Yeah, so the supposed number one pick, what people don't realize is that there's an award out in college football. It's actually called the Joe Moore Award for the most outstanding offensive line unit in college football. The team that Kyler Murray was playing for, the Oklahoma Sooners, their offensive line received the award for being the best offensive line in college football. How many NFL teams have the best offensive line in the NFL?
New England Patriots.
And there's not, right, except for maybe the New England Patriots. There really isn't going to be one. And if you want someone to succeed like they did in college, you have to put them in the same situation that they were like in college. And Kyler Murray, I'm making, I guess, a bold prediction, if you want to call it that, but I don't think he's going to be as successful as he was in college. I didn't say he's not going to be successful in the NFL, but I don't think you're going to see him be as productive as he was. And I'm hoping the Dolphins are able to pick up, maybe a later round, first round draft pick from another team, and then possibly, either an early pick for the 2020 draft, or maybe a little bit later round draft pick. I'm not sure what the numbers look like. Obviously, it depends on who they partner with. But if they can pick up another 3rd or 4th round pick in the 2020 draft, or in the 2019 draft, I mean, they can start getting even more younger guys, which again was the goal, which we talked about, the goal of Ross, the goal of Flores, the goal of Greer. So I think the Dolphins are going to. I personally think they're going to draft down. I think that's the right move for them if it's possible. They're definitely not going to be taking a quarterback in the first round. It's my opinion.
Chad, if you are GM Chris Greer, what's your move?
Well, I think agreeing with Ian that the quarterback is obviously the most important position, and you can't win consistently in the NFL without a good quarterback. And so that's the priority, whether it's 2019 or 2020, is to get that quarterback. Now, I don't think there's anybody, even the personnel guys in the NFL, that can say this college guy is going to be a top 10 NFL quarterback. I just don't think until you get them in there and you see how they adjust to the speed and the complexity of the game. So I think Miami is going to get a quarterback in 2019. Is it going to be the quarterback? I don't think they're going to know. But I don't think you're going to see Ryan Fitzpatrick play more than half of the season at most as a starter, unless the Miami Dolphins are miraculously like 6-1, out of the gate, or they're in the playoff race, which I don't anticipate. So as soon as Miami is out of the playoff race, then suddenly to be the best team possible in 2020 or 2021, it doesn't make any more sense to continue to play Ryan Fitzpatrick. Then you want to play a rookie. And so I think they're going to have somebody on staff or on their roster that will be a rookie they can play. And it doesn't matter if that rookie ends up being the guy or not for the 2020 draft, because you can always use a couple good quarterbacks. And so I where the quarterbacks ranks that they have, nobody knows that with Greer and Flores, but I really, really feel strongly they're going to get a young quarterback in this draft at some point. Now, for my personal opinion, I think Dwayne Haskins is the only quarterback that I would probably take in the first round of this draft for the Dolphins. And the reason with Miami is it's going to be much more along the lines of the Patriots offense. And you can already see that. That's the reason they went and signed 2 tight ends, is Miami is going to run a lot more sets, which utilize 2 tight ends on the field rather than 3 and 4 wide receivers. I'm not saying that's going to be their base offense. They're going to be able to run that offense, which Miami hasn't had run that sort of an offense probably since Sperano was the coach. Both Philbin and Gase almost exclusively ran 3 and 4 wide receiver sets with the quarterback in the shotgun the majority of the time. Very rarely during those coaches' tenures was Miami not running at least a 3 wide receiver quarterback in the shotgun set. So you've already seen Miami bring those tight ends in, and they've already openly even said in the media they are going to bring in a fullback. So you're going to see some more power run formations, which tells you Miami's quarterback will not just be exclusively sitting in a shotgun. They're also going to be playing under center. So when you look at the college quarterbacks, I'm looking at some of the ones, which ones have actually spent a fair amount of time in the pocket under center doing progressions, where you're pre-reading the defense and then you're going through 1, 2, and 3 to figure out where you're going with the football. That's what the top NFL quarterbacks typically do. That's what Tom Brady does all the time. Is he's pre-snap reading, he's deciding where to go with the ball. He's post-snap reading it, and he's getting the ball to where it's supposed to go. To me, the 2 best quarterbacks, if you want you could start right now, would probably be Daniel Jones or Dwayne Haskins. They both have played a fair amount under center.
Oh, for Miami.
What's that?
For Miami.
For Miami.
Okay, I was about to say, it's like Daniel Jones.
Yeah. Yeah, they both make sense. I honestly, in terms of Kyler Murray, I don't think he's going to be able to do that in the NFL. Or if it is, he's a long ways away from playing under center and sitting in the pocket, reading progressions. And to make that clear, I know Lincoln Riley went out and said, well, Kyler Murray threw like 70-80% of his passes from the pocket. Yeah, those passes are one read, throw it to a receiver quickly on wide receiver screens. A lot of the stuff Adam Gase liked to do. If you draft Kyler Murray, I've been saying this since the beginning, you have to be committed to have him run the football. Otherwise, he's not going to be that effective. And if you watch his games, I watched a lot of film on Kyler Murray. He has to move around a lot in the pocket just to see the lanes because he's so short. He can't sit in the pocket over the lineman, so he moves around to look for an opening to throw the football. He's an amazing athlete, one of the best running quarterbacks I've ever seen in terms of how difficult he is to get your hands on and sack him. So in today's NFL, with all the rules to protect the quarterback, I'd have no problem if you want to structure your offense that way. You basically are keeping him in the shotgun all the time, and he's doing one or two reads, and if it's not there, he just takes off and runs. And he's so talented at running the ball, you can absolutely be successful doing that. Where most teams fail, though, is it's hard to keep a quarterback healthy in the NFL if he's going to run the ball maybe upwards of 10 times a game and take those hits. And so that's the big question on Kyler Murray. But I think any team thinking they're going to bring Kyler Murray in, put him under center, and have him sit in a pocket and go through progressions, he's nowhere close to being ready to do that. Way, way far behind Dwayne Haskins or Daniel Jones. I think those are the two most likely early draft picks for the Dolphins. I don't think they're going to be too interested in Drew Lock. I'm not a big fan of Drew Lock because I watched quite a bit of film on him. He has a really strong arm. He's really fiery, but he makes a lot of bad mechanical throws. A lot of them. He throws off his back foot. What's that?
Jay Cutler?
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of Jay Cutler, where he has a really strong arm, but he'll make an amazing 25-yard out pass on rolling out, and you're like, wow, this guy's really talented, and then he'll miss an open wide receiver out in the flat because he'll throw a ball with bad mechanics and it'll be an inaccurate pass. I don't think that Miami's going to want to deal with trying to fix somebody. How many years were they trying to fix Ryan Tannehill to be what they want him to be? So I just don't think Locke is going to be somebody the Dolphins are that interested in. In terms of the later rounds, I think Chris Greer, he played some under center in both, and I kind of liked his film.
You mean
Will Greer? He did progressions pretty well.
Will Greer, not Chris Greer.
Or sorry, Will Greer.
Yeah, there's too many Greers.
Too many Greers. Will Greer from West Virginia. I think he could be maybe a third to fourth round target, maybe even second round target of the Dolphins. And then, I mean, as you guys probably know from Twitter, I think Easton Stick could be maybe like a fourth or fifth round sort of target for the Dolphins. That's one of my favorite moves, other than Dwayne Haskins. If Dwayne Haskins is at 13, I think Miami's crazy to not just draft him, because he has all the tools you want to be a successful franchise quarterback, and you're getting him just for one first round pick at 13. And so a lot of teams are giving up, 2 first round picks or a first round pick and several picks to move up to get guys like him in other drafts. And so if he's there at 13, or even maybe falls to 8, 9, 10, I think maybe you give up a mid round pick to just jump up a few spots and get him. I think Miami will do that if he falls a little ways with Haskins. Otherwise, I like the idea of going with Greer or Locke, and Greer or Stick, and those guys have played under center. Stick did it a lot. He would play out of shotgun. He'd play under center. North Dakota State played a lot of variability in their offense, which is what Miami's going to do. You're going to see Miami come out and shotgun 3 and 4 wide, and then the next series you're going to see them come out double tight with the fullback, and that's what the Patriots are so good at. Is you can have a great set of defensive backs, so they'll just run power football all day and make you pull your defensive backs off the field. Or if you don't have very athletic linebackers, they'll just split out 3 and 4 wide and throw all game and make your linebackers have to cover if they can't do it. And so that's what the new version of the Dolphins, I assume, are going to be doing this year. So you need a quarterback that absolutely can play under center. And so those are the guys I'm kind of identifying. But if I'm a GM right now, why not take a Will Greer or Easton Stick in the middle of the draft? If you get to 1 and 4, 2 and 5, somewhere in that range, you pull Fitzpatrick out as your starter, and you just insert somebody like Easton Stick and say he's going to start the rest of the way. And he might have a little bit of ups and downs, but hey, I've already used my higher draft picks, like my first and second, third round range. Maybe I've picked up another guard and a tackle somewhere in there. I've built my offensive lineup a little bit for him to play behind. And if Easton Stick lights up the NFL by his 4th or 5th game, and he's clearly going to be a superstar, I found my guy. If he's not looking that good and he's struggling, well, I play him the rest of the year. I'm probably not going to win a lot of games, but I've already got my backup quarterback now for next year in Easton Stick, and then I can try to chase a Herbert or Tua next year. But what I'm doing is I'm using 2019 and 2020 both to try to get a franchise quarterback. I don't want to sit through a full season if I'm Miami and not be trying to get my franchise quarterback, because I just don't think it matters if we get a couple good linemen on the offense or defensive side. Yeah, that helps our team, but we are not going to win consistently to make the playoffs or win in the playoffs without a franchise quarterback. And you just don't get a franchise quarterback in free agency. And so to me, you keep drafting a quarterback somewhere every year and give him the opportunity to be your franchise guy. So that's where I'm at with the Dolphins. In terms of their team, one other thing I'll throw in there is Flores is going to completely rebuild their defensive line. So I feel like unless Haskins is available at a reasonable price for the Dolphins, I feel like they're probably going to focus heavily on defensive line in the early part of the draft.
All right, let's pretend the quarterbacks are gone. Who are you drafting?
Well, there's a whole stable of impressive linemen, so I don't know where Flores. My favorite's Ed Oliver. I don't anticipate he'll fall to 13, but he would be nice because you can play him in a 4-3 D tackle position, and you can play him in a 3-4 defensive end position. He's big and quick for his size, and he would have a good motor to just disrupt all day from either spot for Flores. Otherwise, though, there's some good linemen from Clemson. Several. I mean, there's just so many good ones. But if it's me, Ed Oliver would be my number one pick. Otherwise, maybe an edge guy from Clemson. I don't have them ranked on which ones I would say there's probably 4 to 5 blue chip defensive linemen in this draft, either at tackle or edge, maybe even 5 or 6.
Okay. All right, so now let me run down what my current plan is, because, when you're leading up to the draft, it's like your plan seems to change like every other minute. So here's my plan as of now, and this is based on what I would have done if it was available. So I recently wrote an article for Dolphins Wire, which I am also doing writing for now, and what I would like to do is, yes, first of all, trade down. And frankly, I don't care if it's for an extra 2019 pick or a 2020 pick. I don't care. Whatever works for you. But I would absolutely trade down into like a few picks down, or even into the bottom of the round, because you brought up all of the blue chip players in the trenches and stuff. My plan, straight up, would be to not necessarily worry about the trenches right away. I wrote this article, and right now it sounds like a really enticing idea, is with all the depth at defensive line in this draft, Miami could easily use their extra pick or their 1 second round pick to pick up a stud like, let's say, Dexter Lawrence out of Clemson. He's the guy who's projected to fall more than likely to the second round because of he's a big bodied nose tackle type, which, by the way, the Dolphins are going to need. They will need a nose tackle, and Dexter Lawrence would fit that bill very well. But what I would do at this point is trade down, see if you can get to like 16, 17, even the lower you get, the more likely you are to get even more picks, because that's a team that desperately wants to get something from you. I would go cornerback. For real, cornerback. If all the quarterbacks are gone, if Haskins is gone, because that's the only one I really want. Like, I don't even want Daniel Jones either, because Daniel Jones does not exactly fill me with anticipation. If Haskins is gone, then I am absolutely looking to trade down and get my hands on a cornerback. There are at least 3 that Miami could easily pick up, and he could become the Patrick Surtain to Xavier Howard's Sam Madison. Now, there are a lot of people still who are convinced that Xavier Howard will not be sticking around, that all the talk about how the Dolphins are doing contract extension talk and they want to bring him or keep him around long term, it's all bunk, because every time a player develops in Miami, they have to leave because that's just how it works, because that's so Dolphins and blah, 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 blah. No. Howard is staying. This front office is too smart to let Howard walk, knowing what he can do on a football field. He is going to be the new Sam Madison. He's a press corner. He knows how to get up on people's faces and get in their way. He is going to stick around. So now what Miami needs is somebody to be right there next to him. I asked you guys in the in our direct messages the other day, like, can you think of some New England Patriots cornerback tandems of the past? There was Ty Law and Asante Samuel that was brought up. That was by you, Chad, I believe. And then I remembered Malcolm Butler, Stephon Gilmore. That was another one that's more recent memory. But New England's secondary is consistently a very dangerous thing to deal with, and they run dime and quarter defenses all the time. That's how they function, and there is no way that Brian Flores is going to come in here seeing how well it's worked in New England, and he's not going to try and emulate that very idea. So that means there are going to be a lot of players in the secondary. There's going to be extra safeties. There's going to be extra corners running around. There's not going to be as much emphasis on linebackers, I don't think. I really don't. I don't think Miami's going to need a lot of linebackers. I'm sure that, at least for 2019, the trio of Kiko and Jerome Baker and Raekwon McMillan, that's going to be more than enough as far as linebackers go. And I'm sure they'll pick up an extra couple guys just because they're going to need some depth. But I don't think there's going to be a super high emphasis on linebackers this year. Because, again, corners are a thing. But who is the other cornerback right now who Miami would have to work with alongside Xavier Howard? They signed Eric Rowe, who Flores does have some familiarity with, but he's not exactly a superstar in the making. Cordrea Tankersley, who you hope can develop into something who's pretty good, but at this point, the hope is not very high. But again, that's why you bring in a new staff, to see if maybe you can get something out of it. Torrey McTyer, who showed promise, but fell short as soon as he got thrust into the starting role. And then Jalen Davis, Cornell Armstrong, and a couple other guys. I can't even remember their names. So that is not a list that inspires confidence. So there are 3 guys in the drafts right now who you could pick in the first round, and they would have a serious chance to become an excellent cornerback. You have Greedy Williams out of LSU. He was the consensus favorite pick for a little while. Then you have Byron Murphy. You have DeAndre Baker. Those are those 3 guys, Williams, Baker, and Murphy, are the 3 guys who you could pick in the first round, and they could very easily become the Patrick Surtain to Xavier Howard's Sam Madison. That is my plan. That's what I would do. Now, if they do stand pat at 13 and they get themselves a stud defensive lineman or even an offensive tackle because they need to replace Jawan James, I'm not going to be upset over it. I think that's the right move. But again, all this hinges on the idea that Haskins is already gone, because there are still a lot of people who are not convinced Haskins is anything special, and that if Miami passes on him, it's not going to be a big deal because he's not that special. Tank for Tua, blah, 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 blah. I can't get the cult out of my head. But anyway, that would be my plan, to go cornerback after a trade down. I don't want, if the plan otherwise, if you're stuck at 13 and you can't find anybody who wants to trade down with you, then yes, you go defensive line. You look for like a Clelin Ferrell out of Clemson. You look for maybe Jeffrey Simmons, because supposedly he's got a lot of talent that's being overlooked because of some issues he's had in the past. It's kind of almost a Laramie Tunsil type of thing, except instead of the bong, he apparently hit a woman a while back, several years ago, and that's being overlooked, I guess. That he's very sorry, he'll never do it again, and he's been clean ever since. Which, okay, fine, everybody deserves a second chance, I guess. It doesn't matter what you did unless you killed somebody, in which case then we have an issue. So that's my plan. Cornerback after a trade down, or defensive lineman if Haskins is not there. That's the only proviso. So that's my plan as GM.
Yeah, the good thing, Lewis, is that, as you mentioned, this is a very deep draft on the trenches side, and I know you're talking about cornerback, and Greedy I think he's probably the best cornerback available in the draft coming out this year. So if you have the opportunity to get the top quarterback in the draft, especially late in the first round, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. But, if for some reason he's not there and you're looking at Byron Murphy, as you mentioned, out of Washington, that would not be a bad choice. But then, too, you still got some defensive linemen, you still got some offensive linemen that are very, very talented and had some very, very strong careers. if you're picking later on in the first draft, or I'm sorry, later on in the first round of the draft. I'm on board with any of those choices.
Right, and again, it's even if you like you said, you pick Greedy, you like him the best, right? He's your number one.
Yes.
Even then, that's not the consensus. Not everybody believes that it's Greedy. Some people think it's DeAndre Baker. Some think it's Byron Murphy. So in reality, if any of those three guys would probably suffice. At this point, it's really hard to rank them. So regardless of who they pick, that probably means that that's their best scheme fit, and they have the best chance of being the best guy alongside Xavier Howard. So that's why my plan my plan is basically pick any of these three guys. Likely one of them is going to be available because there's going to be some team who's going to jump up and make a foolish decision and try to pick up Drew Lock, which, again, I think that's going to be a mistake. So I'm very much looking at the Denver Broncos. That's a very John Elway thing to do. Somebody's going to pick Daniel Jones because the power of being a quarterback means that you go in the first round. And one of those three corners is going to be there because, again, all that talent on the offensive line, all that talent on the defensive line. And I'm sure that there's going to be like a wide receiver or a tight end or two who are going to go because they are good players, like TJ Hawkinson, who is being mocked to the Bengals a lot, or Noah Fant. And there's just... And, of course, DK Metcalf, who's supposedly this physical freak of a wide receiver who's really tall and can run really fast, kind of like a Dorial Green Beckham back in the day, except minus the other issues. So there's going to be one of those three corners available by the time Dolphins get to pick, even if they do trade down. So that's why my plan is as it is. Now, Chad, you spent a lot of time on the quarterback position, and now I talked about Haskins, that's fine, but I am going to say for the record that if it were me, you brought up Will Grier as a potential mid-round, second round, third, fourth, whatever quarterback. I have fallen in love with Tyree Jackson. I want Tyree Jackson. Listen, I understand what you said.
Here.
You're yeah, Chad. But let me. Chad, you are very correct when you say that I don't think the Dolphins are going to want to pick somebody who they're going to have to fix. That's very possible because as talented, as much raw talent Tyree Jackson has in him, there is going to be some things that need to be fixed. Mainly his stance, how he throws, how he progresses. All that is true. But there is just so much raw talent there. Even with his self-taught, because we found that out during his combine run, is that he is a self-taught quarterback, and most of his mechanics are just the way he taught himself to play the game. So if he could get his hands on somebody who is willing to sit him down and teach him how to do it correctly. We're going to have Jim Caldwell. He's worked with quarterbacks like Jackson before, the strong-armed, inaccurate type of quarterback, and if Jackson were picked up in the third round, Miami could potentially have themselves a very, very special player who he may not even become the franchise guy. He could end up being the backup depending on how fast he develops. Because if Jackson somehow lights up the league in 2019, then who knows? They may just decide not to go draft. They may not. Let me try again because I'm talking too fast for my own good. If Jackson becomes great in the 1 year that he's there, they may decide to forego drafting a quarterback in 2020 altogether, assuming that, well, Jackson's already on a bright path, let's just go ahead and keep him there. It's basically in the same vein as Lamar Jackson, who a lot of people were convinced he wasn't that great of a quarterback, but the Ravens decided to trade back up into the first round and pick him up, and I don't think they're really regretting that decision now. They were willing to trade Joe Flacco to Denver, and now they're going to just stick with Lamar Jackson completely. He's a very exciting player. He's fast. He can throw better than Tim Tebow. There's a lot of people saying he's the black Tim Tebow, which, by the way, is just not true. Jackson is by far the better player overall. But they're not exactly upset with having Lamar Jackson. Tyree, I just realized they're both of the last names of Jackson. But Tyree Jackson, if he were he's in that same vein as Lamar. And if they could fix his mechanics, Get his stance proper. Make sure that he's dropping back correctly. That his shoulder his feet are set. His shoulders are proper. Those are easy mechanics to fix. It's not like, oh, we have to teach him how to progress in the pocket. Oh, we have to teach him not to panic when there's people coming at him. That's not the type of thing you can teach. You can teach, don't widen your stance so much in the pocket. Don't make sure you're able to reset better. Those are things that you work on just out of repetition. Those are mechanical things, not mental things. Jackson is a very fixable prospect. He's not somebody that you're going to look at him and like in 3 years he's still going to be the same guy. You can work with him. And I would absolutely jump at the chance to draft him. He's that talented. That's what I would do in 2019 if I were the Dolphins. I don't care if you have to pick him in the 3rd round, because with all the mock drafts that I've done lately, it seems to me that Jackson has risen up the draft board something fierce, because I used to be able to draft him in the 4th and maybe even 5th rounds. And as time has passed leading up to the draft, Jackson has been getting picked higher and higher. And if I don't pick him in the 3rd round, Jackson goes to some other team. Obviously, this is simulation and you can't really predict for real, but it's telling to me that a quarterback who I used to be able to pick in the 5th round if I wanted to, now I can't even sniff him in the 4th round. Teams are going up. Or at least, well, not necessarily teams, but evaluators at least are getting high on Jackson. He could very well be something special.
So I like Tyree Jackson. I like, and not by coincidence, I know that there was a report, I want to say it was either yesterday or the day before yesterday, where, the Dolphins paid a visit to him.
That was like a couple of weeks ago. They went to Buffalo to go and visit him at his school.
Exactly. So, obviously they're very serious. Like, I don't know how many other players that could potentially be drafted in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round you're going to get potential visits from, from different teams. I know all the teams do their own homework, and I know that there's a lot of film work that could be studied, but to pay a personal visit, I think that tells you that the Dolphins are obviously very interested in him. And everything that you talked about his potential, and his ability to learn, that goes back to what I first started with when we first started this podcast, which is, do we have the right coaching staff that can develop these players, that can develop a Tyree Jackson if he does get drafted? I like how he throws. I like, the fact that he has learned on his own. I like the fact that he's been a quarterback for a while, which, our last quarterback, without naming names, was a wide receiver before he turned into a quarterback.
That's not true, Ian. No, wrong. He was a quarterback turned wide receiver who went back to quarterback. He was not a wide receiver.
Yeah. But anyway, I would be okay. I do think he's probably going to fall to the 4th or 5th round, to be honest with you. I know he's climbing up draft boards, but I know when the draft process started, I saw him going in the 5th and 6th rounds, to be honest with you. I know that his name is getting thrown out there a lot, and that might be what's creating the hype for him to be drafted a little bit higher. But, I look at 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round draft picks as players that are going to contribute pretty quickly. Players that are going to be on the field more than not, and unless, like you said, Lewis, you got Fitzpatrick that's playing the first 5 or 6 games or 8 games of the season, and then Tyree Jackson comes in the final 6 or 8 games of the season, and you just let him try and see what he's able to do. If he's not going to sniff the field, I don't know if you want to risk that 3rd pick on a quarterback. And I know there's probably a lot of people that disagree with that, but I would want to see someone who is going to be an every week contributor from a 3rd round draft pick. Well, but that's my own personal opinion.
Yeah, this is where I'm probably one who disagrees with that, because here's why. When you say you want your first 3 picks to be instant contributors, okay, when you're talking about the quarterback position, that goes out the window. It really does. Because think about some of the best quarterbacks who have been picked out of lately. You have Aaron Rodgers, obviously. He was drafted in the 1st round by the Packers. And the quarterback who was there at the time was Brett Favre. The idea was never that Aaron Rodgers was going to take Brett Favre's job until after Favre left. There was never this idea that Aaron Rodgers was going to come in and beat Favre. Favre was still Brett Favre. So he sat for a while. You have Russell Wilson. He won the job in Seattle. Matt Flynn was supposed to be the guy for that first year. They drafted Russell Wilson because he was going to be the developmental kid who eventually turned into the superstar. When you're picking quarterbacks, and if you think they have enough potential, you can't afford to let them slip because you think, well, they're not going to contribute right away. No. With quarterbacks, there's like a whole different set of rules when it comes to quarterbacks, but only quarterbacks. If it was any other position, I would agree with you. But when it comes to the quarterback, you all those rules go out the window. It doesn't matter if they contribute now. It doesn't matter if they contribute 2 years from now. They are a quarterback. The rules don't apply to them. It really doesn't. The rules don't apply to them because they have their own set of rules. When you're a quarterback, you go up draft boards. It's how it works. How is Daniel Jones, who, by the way, is like one of the most unspectacular first-round quarterbacks I've heard of in a very long time, just somehow he's creeping his way up. He's going to get drafted higher and higher and higher. How is that going to happen? I don't know. I'm hoping that it's just a whole bunch of hype coming from the media because holy moly, I don't see other teams being that high on this guy. I remember last year when everybody was assuming guys like Luke Falk and Mason Rudolph. Mason Rudolph was supposed to be an early second-round pick because he had all this potential and he had all this great stuff going for him. The rules didn't apply to Mason Rudolph. They think he's going much higher than he actually is. Mason Rudolph wound up going in the 3rd round of the Steelers. And we didn't see another quarterback picked until much, much later. We thought Luke Falk was supposed to be like a 4th rounder bottom. And he didn't go until like the 6th round, I think. And that's when all the other quarterbacks went. He was supposed to be a 4th round quarterback. And he went in the 6th, and that's when all the other quarterbacks started going because it's clearly the evaluators and people who were hyping up quarterbacks because that's the marketable position. Those are the quarterbacks those are the players that the rules don't apply to them. It's a whole other ball game when it comes to that position. So if your potential quarterback you believe they're talented enough, it doesn't matter if they're going to contribute or not. You pick them whenever you think they're going to need to be picked. Tyree Jackson is more talented, as is, even before he even gets a little bit of tutoring. I believe he's more talented than Mason Rudolph, Luke Falk, or any of those other quarterbacks that got picked last year. The only ones who are better than him are the actual first-round quarterbacks. So that's when you're talking about quarterback. That's when the rules go out the window. I don't care if your 3rd rounder, Tyree Jackson, doesn't contribute right away. It's not a wasted pick because that's a guy with so much potential that you might get something special out of him in a few years.
By the way, it's not fair. That whole Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre comparison is just not fair. You can't. There's not many teams that has a Brett Favre playing quarterback, and then you've got somebody who can wait a year. But that's the thing is that the Dolphins are rebuilding. They're in the process of setting themselves up for something special, and that's why you can do that. If the Dolphins were going for like a Super Bowl run and they desperately needed more players who could help contribute, then absolutely, you don't even bother going for a quarterback. You don't need one. If you're going for a Super Bowl run, it's probably because you already have a quarterback. But since the Dolphins don't have one yet, at this point, there's really nothing to lose.
Yeah, I think obviously disagree with the ranking on and we'll see after the draft. But I don't think Tyree Jackson's going to get drafted. That's my opinion on it. If he is, it'll be at all. He might get drafted in the 6th or 7th round.
Whoa!
And the reason I can explain why for you is he is so far away from being able to play in the NFL right now from a being prepared standpoint. So he'd have to be a team's 3rd quarterback. And so you're probably looking at a practice squad player or somebody that's willing to keep 3 quarterbacks. And the problem right now you have with Tyree Jackson is his if you watch him play, he has a very long delivery point. He has a long wind-up throw. And what you run into in the NFL, the problem in the NFL isn't, people focus so much on arm strength, but it's much more the mental capacity to handle the speed of the game. And so when you come in as a college quarterback, it's how quickly can you pre-snap read the defense and understand the complexity of where everybody on your offensive scheme is supposed to go when they read the defense. So your receivers are reading where the D-backs are lined up and the linebackers are lined up. The quarterback's reading it, and they all have to understand what routes you're supposed to run based on where everybody's lined up. So you have to have that mental capacity to read all those complex formations continuously. And then the really, really hard part you can't judge the quarterback struggle with is once that ball snapped, how well do you navigate the pocket? How well do you get through your progressions and read where everybody's at and get the ball out quick? Because that's always the key in today's NFL is read, get the ball out. And so if you're Tyree Jackson, the limitations you're dealing with as a team is he's from such a small college, he's hardly played any meaningful competition yet. He just hasn't at Buffalo. And so you're putting him into the NFL where the competition level is going to jump astronomically for him. The speed the corners are moving at, the complexity of the defenses he's looking at is going to be overwhelming for him at the beginning. And so you're wondering, can he adjust to how much harder the pro game is going to be? And if he does, for Tyree Jackson, he's got to be able to process even faster than most of the quarterbacks in the league that are successful because he has a long delivery point. So he's already got to take that extra half second to get the ball out. And so that means he has to read 1/2 second faster in his progressions because it's going to take him that much longer to get the ball out. And I think teams are going to look at that and they're going to say, this guy's a major project. Yeah, he's impressive in size. He's big. He can run pretty fast for his size. Yes, he does have a big arm when he gets the ball out, but is he going to be able to handle the complexity, speed of the game with a long release like that? And so if you're a team, you're looking at him like this is a high potential down the road, but really, really long ways out. We can't afford to have him start a football game as our number 2 quarterback. Nowhere close. And you're probably looking at him needing to be in the NFL for at least a couple seasons, unless he's amazingly at picking things up really, really, really fast. You're just looking at a guy that you're seeing how he develops deep on your roster for 2 or 3 years. So I don't think many teams in the NFL are willing to even carry a third quarterback in today's NFL right now. So when you're looking at practice squad players, you're late in the draft. You don't draft guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round that you're intending to just put on your practice squad. You're intending to draft guys you can get on the field. And he's just a long ways out. I mean, I know you guys love his potential. I'm trying to be a realist for you. I don't know if he'll even be drafted.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
Who has more raw talent, Tyree Jackson or Easton Stick?
I think Easton Stick by a long shot.
In
Easton
raw
Stick
talent.
Yeah, raw talent. That's because of the release point. I think Tyree Jackson's release point's probably unrealistic to be successful in the NFL. So he'd have to figure out how to throw the ball completely different to be successful in the NFL. I think Tyree Jackson would. He's a huge strip sack risk too. Like every time he drops back, when you got to bring your arm that far back on a windup, it's a much easier strip sack for a defensive end, and so it makes him a little bit harder to block for as a tackle because you got to keep the ends a little bit further away from him from slapping that ball out. Easton Stick to me is a much more capable runner as a quarterback. He's much quicker, and he's also been a starter in a pro offense that plays both spread and under center for the last 3 years, and he's played pretty well. Like I was pointing out the Iowa game where Easton Stick just had the snot beat out of him, and he led that team back to win against a team that had superior line play on both sides of the ball. So I think Stick's a lot more likely to succeed in the NFL, and I think Stick's a long shot, to be honest. I mean, I like his ability, but I think the chances of him succeeding in the NFL are still very questionable just because it's so difficult. I don't know if he has the pure arm strength to do it, even at how successful he's been. So for me, really, I like Easton Stick maybe in the 5th round, somewhere in there, just to see if he does hack it. It's not that I don't like Tyree Jackson. I would just probably be targeting him maybe 6th, 7th, or free agency after the draft to add to my team. And I think you'll probably see that's where most of the teams slot him, that he's nothing but a big project with a lot of talent. And the talent's there, Lewis. I'm not saying it's not. It was just a lot of obstacles for him to overcome. And For me, it's really not that close. I do like Will Greer, but I mean, just to put something in perspective, the previous touchdown passing record in college football was 39 in a season by Drew Brees. That was the previous one. Last year, Dwayne Haskins threw 50 touchdowns, and this is a guy that doesn't play in an Oklahoma type offense. That's almost exclusively him sitting in the pocket throwing the football. He's very accurate. He's got a very big arm. I love how Dwayne Haskins navigates the pocket. So to me, he's probably, being realistic, that's not what people want to hear, but being realistic, he's probably the only, in my opinion, the only first-round draft pick in the draft, and he's probably the most likely chance to get a franchise quarterback of anybody in this draft. It's just not a strong quarterback draft. Overall, that's just the reality of it. So I think you'll probably see this draft play out not too different from last year, as you were touching on, Lewis. I think you're going to see guys drafted much later than people are talking about right now, just because teams have got that awareness that we can't waste a third, fourth, fifth round pick on a guy that at least we can't feel comfortable being our number two quarterback. So I think that's probably where it's at. Now, that doesn't mean Miami won't be interested in Tyree Jackson. I personally think the position is so valuable. I draft Tyree Jackson late if he's there and pop him on my roster and put him on the practice squad or even carry him as a number 3. And I have him learning everything he possibly can from Ryan Fitzpatrick. I have my quarterback coaches working with him every day. And it might be that payoff. And to me, he's like my plan C if whoever I start this year as a young quarterback doesn't pan out, and whoever I draft next year high doesn't pan out. Well, during that 2-year time, I would rather be trying to develop Tyree Jackson, deeper on my roster, and maybe 2021, wouldn't that be something if you had a Will Greer this year who didn't really play out that well, and then you somehow draft Tua or Herbert next year, and they really don't play out that well. Then 2021, your starter is Tyree Jackson because he really progressed up. You don't really know, but so I guess what I'm trying to differentiate for you guys is I don't think he's going to be much more than a 6th or 7th round pick if drafted, but I do agree that the ability is there. That's just me being real with where I think he'll fall in the draft.
I'll say this before we close out. I will be shocked if Tyree Jackson goes farther than the 5th round. For real. Like, if he drops out of the 5th, I will be beyond stunned. I know everything you just said, but that's just me.
This is where I need Ron to do one of my bets with.
Yeah. I tried to get him on, but he's got work and family, dude. I tried to get him to come on. He's like, nah, I can't, man. I really want to. He's like, I want to do podcasting again, and I can't. It's like, dude, we gotta figure it out. But anyway. All right.
Hey, one quick I'll throw in there too. If it's not a quarterback, I throw on Ed Oliver. I do think Miami likes Montez Sweat. That guy, I know he's had the heart condition stuff thrown out there, but that guy absolutely dominated the Senior Bowl, and that's not easy to do. I mean, you're dominating the other best college football players. And so to me, especially if you maybe want to trade back 5 to 10 picks in the first round, if he kind of falls a little bit.
Sweat is not going to fall.
I don't know. I mean, I think some teams might get a little scared about the heart condition reports. I don't know how serious that is, but he's just another player I think Miami might have their eye on a little bit, more than people realize if they do that. Right now they don't have any defensive ends practically on the roster. I think Charles Harris is going to get converted to more of a linebacker in a 3-4.
That's what he's good at.
Yeah, I mean, they're play to a strength, but I mean, Flores pretty much just sent all of the defensive ends on the team packing. And so I think you have Godshot and Taylor, who basically, to me, are rotational 4-3 D tackles.
They are 3-4 ends. I'm telling you, these guys can be like, that's what they're built for.
I don't think you have that in Taylor. I could see that in Godshot. I absolutely could see it in Godshot. He could play inside outside. I like him, and he may even be better as a 3 or 4 end than a 4-3 tackle. But and I like both those guys, and they're cheap. They're mid-round, late-round picks, actually, so they'll be on the team for several years at what they're getting paid. So
Vincent
they'll
Taylor
be part of that.
Is dangerous, dude. He penetrates. You've seen it.
Yeah, but I think he's more of a guard center gap penetrator. I don't think he's going to be able to go around the edge at all on a tackle.
No, don't go around the edge. Just go push him out of the way.
Yeah, tackles don't get pushed out of the way in the NFL very easy, but I don't think that'll be his strong suit. But that's fine. I mean, we don't have any D tackles right now other than those two guys. But you are going to see them. I don't think they'll probably draft. They might, but I think you'll probably see them sign a 330-pound nose tackle maybe late or after the draft.
Dexter Lawrence.
Well, if they might, depending on where he's at. I just think that so many teams don't run that defense where they even use a nose tackle that allows you to get actually pretty talented nose tackles later in the draft just because nobody will draft them based on their schemes. And so it's kind of using the your schemes to your advantage. The same thing with the fullback. I don't think anybody even hardly drafts fullbacks anymore because there's only a handful of teams, maybe 5 or 6
tight
teams.
ends just get converted to fullbacks. That's how it works nowadays. So.
Right, but what that means is if you want to run an offense at times that uses a fullback, you can pick up a free agent fullback that's very good talent-wise because nobody will even utilize him for the position. Because if he's not a tight end, like if you're an H-back type, that means you've got to be able to play tight end. So if you're maybe like a 6 foot or 6'1", 250-pound, 260-pound type of a player, you're just too short in most NFL's eyes to be even realistic to play tight end. But that's ideal size for a lead blocking fullback. So I think you'll see Miami grab their fullback really later, even after the draft. And honestly, they're going to draft or sign a lot of undrafted players just by the nature of their roster right now. I mean, what do you get, 90, right? 90 guys going into training camp. And I want to say the team right now has maybe 30. I don't know how many guys they even have under contract on the team right now. And so unless they make a whole bunch of trade backs, this team's, they're only going to probably pick up maybe 7, 8, maybe 9, 10 at the most, probably in this draft picks, and that's if they trade back. So that means they're probably going to be trying to fill. I'm predicting maybe 30 players on this team are going to get signed after the NFL draft. Now, part of those will probably be free agents. I don't know when the date's up for the compensation because it doesn't how that. Maybe you guys know this, but for those comp picks, Miami's been sitting out a lot of free agency, I think, because they don't want to lose their comp picks for 2020, right? But I think there's a deadline that passes in free agency that you can start to sign guys. And so I think that's when you'll see Miami get more active signing some of the free agents. And so it's going to be later on in the offseason that you're seeing them add guys. But to me, that absolutely means after this draft is over, I'll bet you they sign several undrafted rookies that make this squad. More so than any teams we've seen in the past, anyway.
I don't doubt it. All right, I guess we'll go ahead and call this a show. I went longer than I thought it would, honestly. But anyway, any final thoughts before we call it?
Oh, for me, I'm excited. Go ahead, Ian. You go first.
Oh no, that's cool. No, I'm not going to steal your words, but I said it at the beginning. We're on the reset right now, right? We've seen what the Dolphins have done from a coaching staff perspective. We've seen what the Dolphins have done from a free agency perspective, which is aligned with what everyone has been saying the Dolphins are going to do this season. I think the most pivotal part of this new regime is coming up next week when the draft comes out. And I'll tell you that when those 7 players or however many players get selected out of that draft, it's going to tell you a lot about what the Dolphins are doing this year in 2019 and also what the plan is going to be for 2020. So I'm excited just because I know that things are different now. I know that we've got some different coaches that potentially are going to do things differently than what we've seen over the last 15 to 20 years. And I know we're not tanking. I know we're putting all of our effort in, and I'm looking forward to when the schedule comes out in a week or so that I can plan my second half of this year and begin next year. Oh, it is tomorrow. All right, sorry, I forgot which Wednesday it was, but I can plan my second half of the year and figure out when I need my Sundays off. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's good. I think my thought is coming into this year, I know it's tough as a fan. I kind of equate this to being on a diet where you want to eat ice cream because it tastes good, and you really want some ice cream, and that's the start of free agency. Is I want to feel good about my Dolphins right now, so I want to see them signing some of the big names out there because I want to feel good. But then after they get picked up and the season starts to progress, then you don't feel so good about it because now you've eaten this huge contract and the player isn't what they thought they were. And you go into those games and it gets so negative because if you're not winning, then the negativity just expands. And so I think about where the teams are right now, and I think of playing a team like the Jets this year, who now have Adam Gase, who we went through and we saw what it's like to pass on 3rd and a half a yard and fail and all the stuff that went on. And I think about they just put all that money in and brought in Le'Veon Bell. And which side do you want to be on? Would you like to beat the Jets with us having Le'Veon Bell and all this money tied up into all the free agents like they did that they signed? Or would you like to beat them as the Dolphins with a bunch of rookies and lower round free agents that we got later on? Think of how that's going to be for the Jets if Miami comes in with all these unknown players and beat them when they've got all this expectation of we've just brought in Le'Veon Bell and we've brought in Adam Gase and we've brought in C.J. Mosley. That to me is going to be kind of the entertaining part of the year is if Flores is successful. If Miami suddenly starts off 3-3 or something like that, but then as the season starts to progress and we pass the midway point and suddenly these rookies aren't playing like rookies anymore and we start to see, wow, this coaching staff's actually developing and they're actually showing these guys how to play professional football. We're starting to see it. That's when it will really start to be fun as fans, is when we're showing up and beating teams like maybe the Jets or Buffalo with all these young players that are way on their upside. They're getting better and better and better. And now you've got that side of it where you've got maybe Adam Gase fighting with Le'Veon Bell because he had Le'Veon Bell blocking the whole game instead of using him. That kind of stuff. And so I think the season, even though you don't have those big names that's enticing up front, I think the season's going to be a lot of fun. I really do.
All right, then. Well, hopefully it's as fun as we're hoping it is. All right, we're going to go ahead and call it now. I don't know when we'll do our next show, but hopefully it will not take as long as last time. So, anyway, thank you all so much for listening, and we hope to hear from you again. All right. Good night, everybody.